Works in seconds, clears you up to 12 hours. Use as directed. Vicks, Sinex, nasal spray. Peter King in 10 minutes. Dontrell Inman of the Colts, who faced that Kansas City defense, will be joining us next hour. Jason McIntyre, Rob Parker. So yesterday, Robert Kraft comes out and said, Brady's he's the greatest quarterback of all time. And, it's obvious, right? But there is hesitation. You drive into work this morning, I'm listening to radio, and there's, whoa, slow down. What about Jim Brown? What about Jerry Rice? And so if you deconstruct the criticisms or the questions about Brady, not the greatest arm, not the greatest athlete, plays in the system, the weak AFC East. Let's deconstruct them. And all of them are fairly obvious. He doesn't have the greatest arm. Cam Newton, Jay Cutler, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, and Stafford have the best arms in the NFL. All, including Rodgers, have frankly underachieved. Aaron has 2. Arm is a 1988 argument. It's just not that valuable. Tom Brady's arm is simply good enough. It's a good enough arm. Average to slightly above average. Dumb argument. Well, he's not a great athlete. Well, he was drafted by a Major League Baseball team at a high school. Peyton Manning wasn't. Joe Montana wasn't. Dan Marino wasn't. Dan Fouts wasn't. Terry Bradshaw wasn't. Troy Aikman wasn't. His athletic ability, again, is historically fine, not an impediment. Well, he's in a great system. You do get that the greatest offensive system ever created was by Bill Walsh in the 70s. It's called the West Coast offense. And that's what Joe Montana had, who was the GOAT before Tom Brady got to his 8th Super Bowl. Folks, we're all in systems. Lawyers go to a court. Doctors go to a hospital. We're all in a system. I'm in a broadcasting company with a long history, football-centric. We give lots of strong opinions before our show, after our show, and during our show. I'm also in a system. Nobody's doing it on an island. Those 3 arguments are very easy to deconstruct. Here's the argument I've never heard made, and I see this all the time, that, the Eastern Conference in the NBA, it's just not very good. Well, one of the reasons it lacks stability was LeBron James, who never gets credit for that, because LeBron, by the way, has left the Eastern Conference to the West, and now most people are seeing what we did for years. At the top, the Eastern Conference is every bit or better than the West. There's 5 legitimate teams. There's more dysfunction in the West than the East. LeBron created that dysfunction. Nick Saban, the SEC has had a lot of dysfunction. LSU has been dysfunctional. No, LSU, if you take out games against Nick Saban, is probably the 2nd or 3rd best program in the country. Nick Saban makes LSU look dysfunctional. The argument against Brady, arm you can poke holes in, athletic ability, obviously, and systems, just a dumb argument. But so is that his division is weak. So let's first compare 2 players who are often compared to Brady, Aaron Rodgers and Big Ben. Tom Brady's won his division 16 times in 18 years. Aaron and Ben, less than half. Do you consider the NFC North with a historically dysfunctional Lions and Bears as a great division? Do you consider the NFC North with the historically incompetent Browns and Bengals as great divisions? Here's what's interesting when you consider the AFC East, Jets, Bills, Dolphins. Do you realize that if you take out the games the Jets and the Bills and the Dolphins have played against Brady, they're 500 teams. They're not dysfunctional. They're average. If Tom Brady wasn't in that conference and they could play an inferior quarterback, they would all be over 500. That Brady's never given credit for creating the dysfunction. Since Tom Brady arrived 18 years ago, the Dolphins and Jets are 500 teams if you take out the Tom Brady games. And even Buffalo, who's considered basically Cleveland with worse weather, is not close to that. They win 45% of their games, which means over 18 years, they go from 8-8 to 7-9, 8-8 to 7-9, 8-8 to 7-9. If you took out Tom Brady, that's not terrible. You know what that's called in the NFL? average. He's in an average division. So we never, when you talk about greatest, we do this with all the greats. The greats create dysfunction because of the desperation to beat them. The constant firing of coaches in Buffalo and Miami and the Jets. In the Eastern Conference, the constant firing of coaches in Detroit, Indianapolis. Frank Vogel really that bad? When you start looking at the SEC, Les Miles was winning 11 games a year. Really deserve to be fired? Ed Orgeron's a better choice. Is that we never give the legends credit for creating the dysfunction. We often just say they're facing dysfunction. The Jets, the Bills, and the Dolphins are not awful. They're average. Tom's made them look utterly dysfunctional. Peter King around the corner. Joy Taylor now with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herdline News.
So, if the Rams want to beat the Saints at the Super Bowl or Superdome this Sunday, they're going to have to slow down Drew Brees. In Week 9 when they played, Brees torched the Rams 346 yards and 4 touchdowns in a 45-35 Saints win. Woo. So LA is going to need to do a little bit better this time around, but Aaron Donald says that they have a plan.
We got a game plan. We're going to stick to it, and we're going to get after him. Anytime you play against a great quarterback like that, he's going to do things that, a normal quarterback ain't going to do. So we know what to expect. We try to do what we got to do to, try our best to make him uncomfortable and get after him. And, but we got to stop the run first before we think about rushing the passer. So we got 2 great backs. We got to slow down and trying to find a way to stop. After we do that, we get after the quarterback and trying to put some pressure on him.
They had no sacks in that game. They also had 0 sacks in the Week 15 loss to the Eagles.
And they also, it should be noted, if you remember that game, they didn't have Aqib Talib. And if you look at the Rams' stats with and without Talib, it is a significantly different defense. And a very well-coached Sean Payton, Drew Brees team attacked the Rams' lack of Aqib Talib.
Right.
He is healthy now and ready to play.
Well, they definitely are going to have to get after Drew Brees, but Drew Brees can make plays on the run. This is usually the strategy. I mean, obviously, you're always trying to get to the quarterback, but the way to make Tom Brady uncomfortable is to push him out of the pocket. He doesn't like to get hit. He doesn't like to have to move off of his spot. But Drew Brees can make plays on the run, and he can and make throws on the run. So You're going to have to get him down more than just put pressure on him. All right, so it's the GOAT versus the kid, right? We just talked about the greatness of Tom Brady for quite some time.
Yeah.
It's the best to ever do it.
Yeah.
And it's up against the best to do it this season. So there's a lot of chatter about Tom Brady metaphorically passing the torch to Mahomes.
Yeah.
And Mahomes is pushing back on that narrative.
I've seen it, but I mean, there's still a long ways to go. I mean, I'm a young guy. He's done so much in this league, and he's still doing it to this day. And so, I mean, he's going to play for some more years to come. So, I mean, I'm always going to strive to do some of the things that he's done with the Super Bowls that he's won. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And I mean, he's not trying to pass the torch anytime soon. I mean, he's played at a high level this year, and I expect him to keep playing at this level for at least another couple years.
By the way, I would say in the last 3 weeks, I've seen more erosion with Drew Brees than Brady. I thought Brady was unbelievable Sunday against a Chargers defense. I thought Brees was average. I didn't think Drew played well at all.
Yeah, it's why I'm going with the Rams this weekend anyway. Like I didn't like what I saw from the Saints, and I didn't like the first half having to get warmed up.
Yeah,
that's especially off of a bye at home. You should be ready to go. But listen, Mahomes, he just always says the right thing, huh?
No, he's a great player, a franchise quarterback, appears to be an incredibly coachable kid. So the good news for Kansas City, they've been. They're one of those organizations, you think Kansas City is kind of weak. They've been a very solid franchise for a long time. They don't win those playoff games you think they should. But let's not marginalize Kansas City as a poorly run, poorly owned franchise. They've had great coaches. They've had Andy Reid and Marty Schottenheimer. They have been a viable franchise. But they played in divisions often with great legendary players and quarterbacks. And so, I mean, Kansas City's always had a pulse. Nobody's ever wanted to go to Kansas City and play. You never looked at your schedule and said, oh, game at Arrowhead, that's a W.
Right.
So they've been a viable franchise. Now they're going to be, for the next decade, an elite, relevant big dog. They're not going anywhere. Andy's got another 7 years to coach minimum, and Mahomes a stud.
Yep. Finally, it's pretty unusual to see a team completely healthy this late in the season, but the Patriots had no one on yesterday's injury report. Rob Gronkowski, not a stranger to the injury report, was asked yesterday how different practice has been when everyone is able to go.
Of course it does. I mean, when you're dealing with that type of stuff and with a lot of guys, you're seeing what you can do and stuff like that. When that's out of the picture, I mean, it just makes practice that much easier, that much better. Just go out there, do what we got to do, focus on the job that you got to do, and do it at full speed, do it at however you need to do during practice so you can go out and replicate it on game day on Sunday.
Yeah. Gronk's become the best blocking tight end in football. You're not going to get much vertically from him, but man, can he block. Can he block?
Gronk's had kind of a rough year.